My name is Kayla Bennett. I am 31 years old. 6 years ago, my older sister told our family I had deliberately cut them out of my life because I thought I was better than them, a lie that wiped out every effort I had made to stay connected and left me looking like the ungrateful one. And right now, I am standing in the emergency room waiting area of St. Mary's Hospital in suburban New Jersey with my father hooked up to machines after his sudden collapse, and my older sister has just stormed in, pointing at me with cold eyes and repeating that same lie to the whole family gathered there, claiming I only showed up to look good for the doctors. But I feel my fists clench as I realize this is the moment I stop letting her erase me. If you have ever had a sibling spin a lie that turned you into the family villain, hit that like button and tell me in the comments what your sibling did to you, because knowing I am not alone makes this easier to tell. It started when I was 14 years old. My family had planned a 2-week vacation to a rented beach house in the Outer Banks, but my older sister convinced my mother that I would be too much of a distraction with my constant questions and that the trip would be better without me. She said it right in front of me during a family meeting, her voice sweet, but the words cutting deep. My mother agreed without hesitation, saying it would give me time to focus on my studies. My father, instead of stepping in, suddenly stood up and said, "Let us not make this a big deal. The trip is for family bonding," then walked out of the room, leaving the conversation hanging in the most frustrating way possible. That reaction shocked me, because it was not his usual silence. It was like he was actively choosing to avoid defending me in a way that made the betrayal feel even more deliberate. The next morning, they left without me. 9 days passed with me alone in the house, eating what was left in the pantry, and wondering why my place in the family always seemed so disposable. That is when my Aunt Linda, my father's sister, who lived a few towns over, showed up at the door. She had heard from a neighbor what happened and offered to take me in for the rest of the time. "Things exist to be used, not feared," she said with a warm smile as she helped me pack a bag. Her house felt like a different world, with real conversations over breakfast and lessons about standing tall in your own story. She took me to the library, bought me new clothes without making me feel guilty, and taught me how to save half of any money I earned from odd jobs. Those 9 days turned into a regular arrangement where I spent more and more time with her, learning that family did not have to feel like background noise. By the time I was 15 years old, I had started speaking up more in school, joining the debate club after she bribed me with a new notebook. My first competition, my voice shook, but I won, arguing that community service should be mandatory for high school credits. My Aunt Linda was in the back row, grinning quietly. She never preached about gratitude. She lived it by showing up for every parent-teacher conference and arranging the doctor visits I had needed for years. When I turned 18 years old, she helped me apply for scholarships for college sitting, with me at the kitchen table for hours, going over forms until the numbers made sense. I got into a local state university and studied business, with a focus on finance, working part-time to save for my own place. During my sophomore year, I met my boyfriend Derek Lawson at a volunteer event for a local food bank. He was organizing the logistics, and I was helping with the inventory. He did not try to fix me. He just listened when I told him about my family and said, "Sounds like you have built your own foundation already." We started dating slowly, and it felt real. Meanwhile, my older sister posted pictures from her college life, tagging everyone but me, and my younger brother followed with his sports highlights. My mother would call occasionally, but the conversations always circled back to how proud they were of my older sister's achievements. My father would sometimes ask about my job, but his tone always carried that same shocking avoidance when things got personal. My Aunt Linda passed away 3 years ago, leaving me with the lessons that became my backbone. She had arranged for me to take over some of her investments in a small way, but it was never about the money. It was about the confidence she had instilled. I landed a job as a senior financial analyst at a logistics company near Newark, where I met my colleague and mentor, Marcus Hale, who saw my potential and helped me negotiate my first promotion. My best friend, Vanessa Klein from college, who now worked in the same building, was the one who first noticed how my family interactions left me drained. "They do not see what you have built," she would say, and her support kept me grounded. Then came the day that brought everything to a head. My father had a sudden health scare, and the family gathered at the hospital. My older sister arrived with my mother and my younger brother, her expression already set in that familiar way. As we waited for news from the doctor, she turned to the group and started talking about how she had always been the one keeping the family together. "Kayla has always been the one who disappears when things get real," she said, her voice laced with that cold sarcasm that hit straight in the soul. My mother nodded, adding, "It is true, she has not been around much lately." At that, my father reacted in a way that left me stunned. Instead of staying silent, he suddenly interrupted with a sharp enough with the blame. "Let us focus on getting through this," but the way he looked at me made it clear he was frustrated with me too, as if I was the one causing the tension. It was shocking because it was not his usual way. It was like he was choosing sides in the most unexpected manner, making the moment even more infuriating. The doctor came out, then giving us an update that my father would need to stay overnight for observation. As the family settled into the waiting area, my older sister pulled me aside. "You know, Kayla, people are starting to talk about how you only show up when it benefits you," she said, her words dripping with contempt. "Like that time with the community project last month. I basically carried it while you were off doing your important job." The jab was personal, hitting the one thing I had poured my heart into at work, coordinating a large donation drive for the local shelter using my logistics skills. My best friend Vanessa had been there when I organized it, and she knew the truth. But before I could respond, my older sister smiled that sharp smile and added, "Is not that right, little sister?" My older sister had barely finished that last cutting remark when the doctor stepped back into the waiting area with a clipboard and a tired expression that made the whole room go quiet for a second. I stood there still reeling from her words, the way they twisted my community project into something selfish when she had barely lifted a finger to help. The doctor explained that my father would need monitoring for another day, at least due to some irregular heart rhythms, but that he was stable for now. My mother let out a long breath and reached for my older sister's hand like she was the one who needed comforting most. Then my older sister turned to the group again, her voice low but sharp enough to slice through the sterile hospital air. "You see everyone? Kayla always makes these grand gestures when people are watching. But where has she been the last 4 months while my father has been dealing with his stress?" She asked, her eyes flicking to me with that cold sarcasm that felt like a personal attack aimed straight at my chest. My younger brother, who had been scrolling on his phone the whole time, looked up and nodded along without saying a word. My mother sighed in agreement, saying it is true she has been so busy with her big, important career that she barely calls anymore. The words landed like a fresh wound, reopening old scars from all the times I had tried to stay connected, only to be met with silence or excuses. I felt my stomach tighten, but before I could form a reply, my father, who was now sitting up slightly in the hospital bed, reacted in a way that caught everyone off guard. He let out a forced, awkward laugh that did not reach his eyes, and then suddenly blurted out, "Well, maybe if Kayla spent less time building her own life, she could help keep this family from falling apart the way it has been." His outburst was shocking because it was not the quiet avoidance I had come to expect from him. Over the years, it was an active jab that aligned him with my older sister in the most unexpected and frustrating manner possible. The room felt smaller after that, with the beeping machines and the faint smell of antiseptic amplifying every tense breath. My older sister smiled triumphantly and added, "Exactly, my father. She has always been the one who thinks she is above all this family stuff." I swallowed hard, my hands shaking at my sides, as my best friend Vanessa, who had rushed over after I texted her, the news squeezed my arm from the side where she had been sitting quietly. She had seen enough of my family dynamics over the years to know when things were about to spiral, and her presence was the only thing keeping me from walking out right then. Later that evening, after the visiting hours wrapped up and my father had been settled into his room for the night, My older sister pulled me into the hallway for what she called a quick, private talk. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she crossed her arms and leaned in close. You know, Kayla, people are starting to notice how you only pop up when there is a crisis like this one. She said, her tone laced with that long held resentment that made every word feel calculated. It is embarrassing for the rest of us when you act like you care, but then disappear back into your perfect little world. I tried to explain that I had been working extra hours at the logistics company to cover for a team member on leave, but she cut me off with a laugh that was pure contempt. Oh, please, save the excuses for someone who believes them. My colleague and mentor, Marcus, had actually been the one encouraging me to take the time off to be here, and he had even covered a few of my reports so I could focus on family. But my older sister did not want to hear any of that. She just kept going, twisting the narrative until it felt like I was the one who had abandoned everyone. The next morning, I went back to the hospital early, hoping for a calmer moment before my shift at work. My father was awake and looking a little stronger, but when I tried to talk to him about what he had said the night before, he shifted the conversation in a shocking new way. He suddenly sat up straighter and said in a quiet but firm voice that carried an edge I had never heard before, Kayla, I have been thinking about this a lot lately, and maybe my older sister is right about some things. You have pulled away more than you realize, and it is hurting the family. His words hit like a fresh betrayal because this was not his usual pattern of staying silent or changing the subject. It was him actively choosing to echo my older sister's narrative in a way that left me stunned and angry all at once. I felt tears prick at my eyes, but I blinked them back, refusing to give her or him the satisfaction. Instead, I excused myself to the hallway, where I called my colleague and mentor Marcus to let him know I might be late. He listened patiently and reminded me that I had earned my position through hard work, not family drama, and that the team would hold things down for me. By the afternoon, my older sister had escalated things further by texting the family group chat a photo from years ago of me at a work event with a caption that read, "Some people choose success over family every single time." It was a small violation, but it stung because it painted me as the outsider once again, and my mother replied with a heart emoji, while my younger brother added a thumbs up. My best friend Vanessa, who was with me at a coffee shop near the hospital after I left, saw the messages over my shoulder and shook her head. "This is not okay," she said, her voice steady. "You have been there for them more times than they deserve, and my older sister is just trying to control the story like she always does." Her support gave me a small anchor, but the damage was already spreading. I could feel the isolation creeping in the way my family's messages started to exclude me from updates about my father's care plan, as if I was not even part of the conversation anymore. 2 days later, when my father was finally discharged, my older sister organized a small family gathering at my parents' house to celebrate his return home. I showed up with a simple card and some groceries I had picked up, thinking it might help. But the moment I walked in, my older sister greeted me with that same sharp smile. "Nice of you to finally join us, Kayla," she said loud enough for everyone in the living room to hear. "We were just talking about how you missed the last 3 family dinners because of your so-called important projects." The sarcasm in her voice was vicious and personal, hitting the exact insecurities I had carried since those early teenage years when I felt invisible. My father, who was resting on the couch, reacted again in a completely different, shocking way this time. He cleared his throat, and instead of defending me, he turned to my mother and said with a sudden defensive tone, "You know, my older sister has a point. We have all been carrying more than our share lately." It was infuriating because this new pattern of his outbursts and alignments with my older sister made the whole dynamic feel unpredictable and rigged against me. The gathering dragged on with my older sister dominating the conversation about how she had been the one handling most of the hospital paperwork and coordinating with the doctors while I had been quote unquote absent. Every time I tried to contribute, she would interrupt with a cutting remark like, "Oh, Kayla, We all know you are too busy climbing that corporate ladder to remember the little people. The psychological jabs kept coming, each one sharper than the last, until I felt my resolve cracking under the weight of it all. My colleague and mentor Marcus texted me midway through, asking if I needed him to call with a fake work emergency, but I told him I had to face this head on. What I did not know then was that my older sister had one more card to play before the night ended. As I was helping clear the dishes, she pulled me into the kitchen alone, her eyes narrowing. "There is something you should know." She whispered, her voice low and threatening. "I have been talking to my father about updating some of the family finances, and it might be time for you to step up and contribute more since you are doing so well at that job of yours." The implication hung there like a threat, and just as I opened my mouth to respond, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number containing a screenshot of an old email I had sent years ago asking for space during a particularly tough time at college. The message read, "This is what family really thinks of you." My heart dropped as I realized this was no accident. It was a deliberate escalation meant to shame me publicly within the family. I looked up at my older sister and saw the satisfaction in her eyes. But before I could confront her directly, my father walked into the kitchen, his expression unreadable. He had overheard enough to react once more in a way that left me reeling. Instead of staying out of it, he suddenly said in a clipped tone that carried quiet anger, "Kayla, if you're going to keep secrets like that email, maybe it is better if you give my older sister some room to handle things her way." The betrayal felt complete in that moment, the repeated small violations piling up until they formed a wall I could no longer ignore. I left the house that night with my mind racing, wondering how much more of this I could take before everything I had built for myself started to crumble under the pressure of their expectations and lies. The following week, my older sister called my office directly and spoke to my colleague and mentor Marcus, pretending to be concerned about my workload while slipping in comments about how I had been missing family obligations. My colleague and mentor Marcus pulled me aside afterward and said gently that he supported me, but the call had raised eyebrows with the team. The interference stung because it showed my older sister was now reaching into my professional life to create doubt. My best friend Vanessa and I grabbed dinner that night, and she helped me see the pattern clearly for the first time. "Your older sister has been rewriting history since we were teenagers," she pointed out, "and now she is using your father's health to tighten the noose." The conversation gave me the clarity I needed to start documenting every interaction just in case. A private talk with my father a few days later added another layer of complexity. He called me separately, and in a tone that mixed regret with defensiveness, said, "I know my older sister can be intense, but she is only trying to hold us together after everything we have been through." When I pressed him on why he kept aligning with her, he reacted in yet another fresh way by sighing heavily and admitting quietly that he hated conflict, and sometimes it was easier to let her lead. The admission did not excuse anything, but it explained the shifting reactions I had seen at the hospital and the gathering. It left me with a bittersweet understanding that my father was not the villain, but his choices still enabled the harm. Over the next few weeks, the family texts slowed to nothing, and the group chat went silent, except for one final message from my older sister declaring that if I could not contribute, then I was no longer part of their circle. My mother sent a single note saying she hoped I would come around, but there was no real outreach. Even my father reached out once in a private message that felt like a quiet goodbye more than reconciliation. I achieved what I needed. I protected the life my Aunt Linda had helped me build, the career my colleague and mentor Marcus had supported, and the friendship with my best friend Vanessa that kept me steady, but the cost was irreversible. The family bonds I had once hoped to repair were gone for good, leaving a quiet loneliness in their place, even as I felt freer than I had in years. I still meet my boyfriend Derek for dinner on weekends, and he reminds me that choosing myself was the right call. But some nights the emptiness creeps in, reminding me that partial victories come with real loss. The lessons from my Aunt Linda stayed with me, though things exist to be used, not feared, and I had finally used my voice to claim my own space. Standing tall no longer felt like pretending, it felt like the only way forward, even if the road ahead was quieter without them. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever drawn a line with family only to lose the connection you thought you wanted, drop a comment and tell me how you handled the loneliness afterward, because sharing these moments makes the weight feel a little lighter.